Greetings from fantastic MSI here in Rio de Janeiro. As you can see, I have mountains in the background and this gorgeous hotel that RIOT's putting us up at. And I wanted to make a quick video to talk about two things: how MSI is going, and this debate that has been happening over the last 2 years about the spring split. And I'm bringing this up because there was a recent article debating again whether or not we should kill the spring split and the importance of it versus, having more international tournaments. The kind of like same argument that's been floating around for a while. So let's dive into it. For the TLDW, Too Long Didn't Watch, basically, I think that there should be a spring split because this is the natural evolution from tournament structures to league. It provides more stability, allows for lower tier teams to exist and to monetize, and creates a lot more jobs and a lot more like specific content for regions. For example, Turkey and Brazil and all these places that have leagues where you can have a whole entire group of people and storylines to tell off of that. So let me dig into the specifics of that. Essentially, the way that I look at it, and a little bit of context on this, I've been kind of looking at the eSport world in an anthropologic way since 2012, and that's when I kind of predicted a number of things that I've built my brand on in terms of where eSport was going. So the way that I break it down is that there's an economic marketplace. It's an entertainment industry, right? Pro sport is an entertainment industry. And so you have sports like WWE, which is the extreme side of entertainment. Then you have sports like Olympic weightlifting, where the pros can basically have to have other jobs because they can't support themselves. So it's more like towards the sporting end and away from the entertainment end. In eSport, there's a fantastic amount of storytelling, and the main point of watching it is to see excellent play and to enjoy the stories and the narratives that go along with it. And it's a diversion that we use to entertain ourselves and that we choose to watch as entertainment. So along with that, we have kind of two smaller or two different things going on. One is the talent kind of distribution in the talent marketplace. So you have, low-tier players and then average at the top of the bell curve, and then you have the elite at the peak. And so you have this kind of like skill marketplace where you're trying to determine who the best players are, and they're being traded around, and they have values in and of themselves in the competitive field. And then you have the amateur landscape, which is totally different from an entertainment industry and operates in a very different, usually different model, and with a lot more volunteers. And the point of a lot of amateur sport, some of it is for entertainment, just below the pro level. So we're talking, NCAA kind of, it gets there in the peak of the season, and the same with ULOL, the university series in the US, and some of the big tournaments like Kings of Spandau in Europe and the Kings of the North in Canada. So those hit the entertainment aspect, but by and large, a lot of amateur level sport is run by volunteers and for the purpose of competition, just pure competition, winning and losing. So those are kind of the three things that are at play that I look at when I'm trying to predict and say what would be the best course forward. And the first thing that I thought that should happen is leagues, and RIOT stepped in and subsidized them and made that happen. They get money from skins, and they did revenue sharing and basically subsidized the salary costs of 10 orgs, in the NALCS and the EULCS, in order to create league structure and build that ecosystem. And it's been fantastically built so far. We have orgs that could not really monetize very well who are able to find stability, and if they're able to stay in the LCS, they're able to monetize. Now, I want to contrast this with a tournament. So let's say that you're an org. Let's say we delete the spring split and you're a low-tier org, and you're trying to cover your overhead costs for, let's say March. So let's say that you have, 5 players and 3 support staff, and your overhead is, $200,000 a month. So you go to a sponsor and you're like, okay, I need a sponsor, and we can put you on the uniform, and we can offer you, this spot for this amount of money per month. And they say, okay, what do we get out of it? And they say, well, it's not summer league right now, so, we don't have a match every week, but this month we're going to these 2 tournaments, and we might go out in the first round, in which case we'll only have 1 game on stage or 2 games on stage. And the sponsor goes, haha, okay, bye-bye. Because you can't guarantee them any value, any viewers, anybody seeing their logo, anybody seeing you perform well. And so you just don't have revenue, and you can't, because esport orgs are kind of starting grassroots right now. And so, you come into the professional sphere and you might have just a couple thousand fans, and you can't really monetize that base directly because you can't build product and you can't sell it to them. So there's a big struggle, and that's why Riot created this ecosystem approach and started building the ecosystem. And if you destroy the ecosystem and go back to a bunch of disparate companies creating a bunch of disparate tournaments, then the orgs are kind of left on their own to try to figure that out, and it's just going to be the winner take all. And very much like Dota, where you have one or two orgs that can sustain themselves, and then everybody else is just a free-for-all kind of players working to build themselves, and that's it. And that is why there are so many esport orgs in League of Legends, and that's why, by the way, I think the Riot Games CEO came out, if you remember that famous post on Reddit that he made, where he was kind of jumping on Reggie of TSM, where he said, oh, you're taking the money from League and building, taking it in other esports. And the reality was, no, that League of Legends doesn't make that much money for orgs, but it does provide stability, right? It provides brand building capabilities, because you can exist and you can break even if you're good. And if you're not good, you can subsidize and hope that you're going to break even in the 10-year span, right? So, or 10x. So I think that there's a lot of value that's been created out of this league structure, and I think it's really dangerous to think about blowing it up and going backwards. But that doesn't mean we can't fix it in an evolutionary way, right? So if we look at the problems with the spring split, the main one being player burnout for the top teams. So remember, this only affects 6 teams in the world, and all the rest of them, the break is fine. It's a fine amount of time. It's just the top teams that have kind of a heinous schedule that could be fixed easily with something like a 2-week bye at the beginning of the split, where the top team gets an extra 2 weeks of vacation and they get a bye. And as far as international tournaments, international competition, I see viewers and fans and viewership numbers as the metric to gauge what people actually want, what the market actually wants, right? So there's individual opinions, but then the market obeys, in mass, kind of the thing that works out the best. And I think that I disagree with people who want a bunch of international tournaments, because I don't like to binge watch a tournament on a weekend. I would rather watch 1 or 2 matches a week of my favorite teams kind of playing in a consistent way. And that's something that fits into my schedule and my life more, and that I enjoy. So I think that that's something we just simply have to look at the numbers. And if you go to a place like the Esports Observer, you can see esport viewership of the top 5 esports for every week for the last XYZ amount of time, and you can just simply compare and look at the data and see that League of Legends is winning with the league structure, and just crushing everybody who's doing tournament structured kind of play like CSGO and Dota. And part of that's due to the larger player base. Part of it's due to the fact that they won the larger player base because of the way that they're structuring their competitive ecosystem. So, it's not like a case of, this just kind of randomly happened that League of Legends is the biggest game in the world, and now we should go to a tournament structure. It's like maybe the way that esports is structured and marketed in League of Legends contributed to the growth of that player base, along with the game being a fantastic game. Okay, so those are things to consider in terms of how to move forward. I think that also that I want to question the reason for international competition. I mean, I think that people just want to know who the best team is for some reason, and they don't want to take the one single standard metric or the 2 final tests, a year to judge it by. But I mean, that's something that, sports agencies, news agencies want to write about, and it's nice to see people like Pete Sampras, crush the world over and over again. But the reality is, a lot of the value driven from the entertainment in sport is from the storylines in context-specific content. So the way that content is trending, and entertainment content particularly, is much more toward localized, individualized content that is suitable to you or me, and in our storylines that we want to hear. And when I see things like the Kings of Spandau tournament, and when I see us going to Hamburg, and cheering, everybody cheering for the German on the team, and when we go to the finals in Canada, and everybody's cheering for the Canadians, and I think it would be a shame to limit the national representation to just 1 or 2 key players and 1 or 2 key orgs kind of floating around the world competing against each other all the time. I think it's much more interesting and fun to have a Turkey league with 10 Turkish teams or 6 Turkish teams, and they're competing against each other, and there's a bunch of people that people can align with and identify with and idolize. I think that's more fun. So I would question whether or not people actually really want more international tournaments. I don't think that's the case. So really think critically about what it is that you would want to see out of an international tournament and ask yourself, like, why fundamentally, and then say, is it worth the insane cost of all of these orgs to travel to all of these places? Because remember, it costs tens of thousands of dollars to like go to an international tournament and host your team in boot camp and set everything up there. It costs an insane amount of money to put on a one-off a live event, and then you have to charge a ton of money for tickets because you need to actually, pay back for all of the, temporary costs associated with such things like venues, etc. And you have to monetize it, of course, heavily. And then at the end, like, are you, the viewer, really going to spend a lot more of your dollars on what's going on? Are you going to spend a lot more time or a lot more money on the sponsors, or enough to make it significantly worth it to go to that kind of structure? And I think that the answer is no. That's my gut. And that's just from looking at the numbers of how it kind of plays out online. I think it's much better to take revenue from a concentrated event like that and use it to subsidize a league. I think E-League is a good example of how CSGO is trying to do this, and maybe that'll be a better kind of comparison point for League of Legends if we see how it progresses in the next 2 or 3 years. So those are my thoughts on it, and I want to know what your opinions are, how we could kind of fix the spring split and make it more interesting. I think that if you look at what Riot's been doing over the last few years, they've done a fantastic job of making it more important. This year in particular, it's awesome because it's a really competitive tournament because you only have the best teams, right? And the prize pool is now more or less equivalent to Worlds because it's crowd-funded, so you guys can all go buy the skin and make it really worth it for the teams, and it's worth the seeding, right? And not only that, but I mean, I haven't been to any MSIs, but this tournament is just incredible to even be at, like, for the players. It's just, I mean, when you go to, this is one of the reasons, by the way, that there's not a lot of other tournaments in League of Legends besides Riot ones, because they ate them up simply because their tournaments are better experiences to attend, better experiences to watch, better experiences, they're just produced really well. And okay, you can say, well, it's because they have more money, but they earned that money with the game that they made, so it's kind of like a cyclical thing, right? So anyway, we get here and, all of a sudden all the players have individual rooms instead of being with roommates, because Riot just feels like they want to have the best possible competition, so they want to have the players not, inhibited by not having private space to live in and somebody snoring next to them or whatever. So just like little things like that really show how player focused this company is, and how even though what they're talking about is the players of the game, the 100 plus million people who play it every month, they also believe that the pro players are their players, fundamentally, and they treat them as such. So it's really just really fun to go to these kind of tournaments and see how well catered and how how much superstars the players feel because of the way that Riot treats them. So I really think that in my opinion, we had a tournament structure. It lost to the league structure. It lost to Riot Tournaments eating up all of those tournaments because they produced amazing events and put them on in a really fantastic way. I mean, they have to be at this point an events company. Look at how many live events that they have to throw every single year in regions all over the world, right? So they're getting really freaking good at it, and I think that they're just phenomenally well run. And I think it'd be really hard for competitors to come into that and try to throw tournaments that were even equivalent. And you have somebody who has 15 years of live tournament experience like ESL, and they find it very hard to compete with Riot's production level at this point because of the experience that Riot has. So I think that what people wish for is a step backwards, maybe not possible, and also we already had it and it lost to what's happening now in the market. The market deemed that this was kind of the direction to go. So post your thoughts down below on how it is that you think we can improve the spring split and kind of get you what you want and what it is you want out of international tournaments. I'd be curious to hear. Okay, thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my YouTube channel, click subscribe, and make sure to check out my Mac training program. If you've ever wanted to be trained by me, but you can't, then just go to mindgames.gg/MAC, and that is where I have my video training course so that you can be trained by my past self as recorded on video 47 times in an iterative, non-tilting progression of mastering your play and climbing to diamond, like I did with with the same program that I tested on myself in 2013 before I made this training program.